Hello everyone and welcome back to Painting with Martin. Today we're taking a look at a miniature from a board game called Skulltails Full Sail. And I was given this miniature from the publisher or designer called Draco Ideas from Spain. So thank you very much. And they shipped me only the miniatures for the game so I could paint them, because the game, as far as I can tell, is only in Spanish. They might have an English version coming up. But according to Board Game Geek, it is a adventure exploration game with lots of miniatures, and it's a semi-cooperative game for 1 to 5 players. In the game, you're a pirate in the Caribbean Sea in search of fame and fortune, and you play the game in several phases. Today we're looking at a miniature called, well, it's a British Redcoat soldier. But before we actually get into painting, I just wanted to show you what the beautiful miniatures actually look like. So I'm going to dim the light a little bit here, so there won't be so much glare on the miniatures. So it will be a bit dark, but there's still going to be some glare. But this is a huge figure pack of miniatures. As you can see here, there are monsters. Oops, let's see if I can angle it up. Monsters, and there are pirate heroes, and there are skeletons and natives and musketmen and all kinds of miniatures, and you get a lot for that. So let me see if I can angle the camera back up here, and I'm going to turn back the light so you can see it, what I'm painting a little bit better. And now we're back to the regular light. This miniature is a British Redcoat, I think it is at least. You can paint it in French or Spanish or Dutch colours, because the game takes place in the golden age of piracy, which took place around the 1680s to the mid 1700s, 1750s, 1760s, if I'm not mistaken. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about British Redcoats while I'm painting, but it's going to be a fairly straightforward video in terms of paint. First, we're going to go over the base colors, then we're going to go over and shade the entire miniature with a nice wash, and finally some finishing touches. And Redcoats are of course red, and they came in a wide variety of colors when it comes to pants and units and stuff like that. But what we're going to do first is I'm going to lower the camera slowly. There we go. And I'm going to apply some Vallejo white, and I'm going to apply it, and I'll show it to you. I'm going to apply it here to the underpants here, as well as these two breeches, as well as also this kind of like haversack or like water skin or something like that. And also to these kind of like parts of the sleeves up here. Later on, also these part of the breeches here, or the coat here, will also be white. And later on, I will also do the straps on the back will be white, but not right now. I'll wait with it in a second. So after all, of course, we give the paint bottle a nice shake, and I'm applying this one with a size 2 brush, and I'm applying it neat, no diluted, nothing. I spray coated this miniature before in white as well, so you can see, as you can see here, it's a little bit of a different color from the spray coated primer. I'll turn around the figure and see if there's anything on the back side. And there's a small part over here. That's it. Now we're going to go over to the part of the coat here. You can dilute the paint if you find that it's too thick. I'm applying a second layer here as well. Make sure that it receives full coverage. and that's recommended especially if you dilute the paint. Then it's time for the water skin. I've decided it's a water skin. Maybe it's a powder horn as well. And in which case you don't have to paint it white. You can paint it with XV88 from Vallejo, from Citadel, which is fine as well. And then finally for the sleeves, and the other sleeve as well. As you can see, it doesn't really show that much right now because the miniature is fairly white anyways, but because of the primer. But it's a lot easier to start with this color than it is with red and then paint white afterwards, in case we make mistakes, and we will. After this one is done, we're going to turn our attention to the boots as well as the tricorn hat. And of course I wash my brush carefully before I apply any more paint, so it dries neatly, and I wipe it off on a piece of kitchen paper as well. For the boots and the tricorn hat, I'm using Glossy Black from Vallejo. I'm going to put down the miniature, give the bottle a good shake, and then apply it over the boots. I apply Glossy Black instead of matte black because I really want the boots to shine. I'm switching out over to an older brush from Winsor & Newton Cosmo brush, size 2. And I'm going to try not to cover the white areas we just painted. And British Redcoats mostly wore black boots or black shoes, but mostly boots. Some of them wore shoes, and black was the usual color. I've taken a look in quite a few pictures when I researched this model of how to paint it, because I'm a sucker for historical accuracy. I'm lowering down here so you can only see the boot right now intentionally, not the rest of the model. So just for you to know, so you can see that only what I'm painting right now. And contrary to popular belief that they were red not to cover like, you know, blood wounds and stuff like that, red has been in color for the British Army from the early 16th century. And if you think I'm wrong about this, feel free to correct me in the comments. I'll be always happy to learn something new, especially about history. Now going over here to the other side of the boots, and as you can already see, they're starting to look a little bit easy, a little bit better right now. Turning around, see if we missed any parts, and there's a tiny detail there. All right, and also the front of the shoes, boots actually. There you go. Cleaning the brush, of course. Switching the brush to a more controlled size 1, size 1, and then I'm going to paint the hat, or the tricorn actually, tricorn hat. And we're going to paint the hat, and it's going to be slightly tricky, but you're going to not want to paint the top brim of the hat because that's going to be in white. So that's where we make a rough outline. Starting with the most difficult part, which is the one closer to the face, before we turn around. You don't also want to be painting part of the face as well, because of course that's going to have a skin color. And this is a good opportunity, if you just got into painting, to really try to control your brush and just put on some nice music and concentrate and sit back. And now for the easiest part, which is the back of the hat. I try to paint it with one stroke of paint if I can, the most part. And try to make sure that the brim of the hat receives kind of the same level of whiteness on top. Doesn't have to be perfect, but it gives you a nice look if it's underneath here as well. So something like this. And then we'll also paint the top of the hat, which is also can be a bit difficult, because we start from the center and we'll work ourselves out, leaving a nice brim of white on top. All the way out into the corners. Something like this. All right. Now the black part has been done of the miniature. Now we're going to turn our attention to the under, kind of like the shirt over here. Cleaning the brush, of course. Since it's a black paint, I would really strongly recommend you to clean it as early as possible, because otherwise it really sticks to the brush and can ruin the rest of the paints really easily. So if it looks like this, kind of like a brown brown color of the miniature, the brush, you're good to go. Now we're going to paint the undercoat, and we're going to use instead of painting white, which could be an option, I'm going to paint Vallejo's Ivory on it. Also neat, and it's going to give you a nice kind of contrasting color, kind of like creamy color. It's one of the best colors from Vallejo's range, and you're going to see that it really will contrast really well with the white as well. Let's see if I can angle it here. Redcoats wore a variety of uniforms, not just pure red on the outside, but these parts here and also the undercoats wore in different colors because it signified which regiment you were in. This one here I'm painting from the 23rd Foot Regiment from 1775, which I looked up online and were actually dressed what we're painting today. They served in in Majorca as well as, if I'm not mistaken, in the Americas. Now with this one done, and you can see if we need another layer on the other pants here and the breeches and these ones, we can do that right now. Now we're going to turn our attention to the one that's going to pop this miniature, which is the coat. And I've chosen a color which is a little bit darker from Citadel's range, called Mephiston Red. You can use, if you want to, use red from Vallejo, but this Citadel range, I find that they use really a nice color in terms of the color red. Let's give it a good shake, apply it neat, make sure that your brush is not damp, and we're going to start with the back side and work our way around the areas where we don't want the paint. If you feel that you're coming across an area where it's really hard to get, and I'll show you a trick right now. You take the paintbrush and it's loaded with paint, and you kind of like push it up into the crack where you want it, and you lose a little bit of force all the way up there, and it usually does the trick. Can paint the undercoat here as well as the underpart here as well red if you want to. If you want to leave it white, that's perfectly fine as well. You want to make sure the paint gets into this kind of like crack here, and you want to paint the wider, like the flat areas where it's first, and then going up And then there is a bayonet here, which you don't want to be painting red. You want to paint this one red, using the same technique as before, pushing it up. And then I'm going to put some more paint on my brush. Sorry about that. And we push, taking another step up here. The other side, we're not all there's some spots here that I missed. If we feel that we miss a few spots of the paint, you can easily apply a second layer as well. I'm going to angle this one, make sure we get all the areas like this. Now, it can be a bit tricky to get everything right here, but with a bit of patience and work, you can actually get it done in quite a good time as well. I'm holding the miniature by the base rim because I haven't painted the base yet. When it comes to these ones, I'm going to paint all the way up until the unit rank insignia up here. Because if you want to make this one a color, say a corporal or a sergeant, you can do that up with the unit insignia. So you paint a way around it, and as well as you also paint a way around the hair over here as well. Taking great care not to touch it, which I did here, as well as not painting the face or back of the head as well. And you can go up over here and paint the sleeves as well. When you're finished, it's going to look pretty much like this. And you might correct some of the mistakes you make on the way as well. I also noticed that we forgot to paint one part white as well, which I forgot. I apologize for that. And that is going to be what you think is the hair, but is actually a wig. And many soldiers wore wigs at the time, white wigs. It was very in fashion and nice. You can see a remnant of that in the British court system, where the judges are actually wearing white wigs, whether they're male or female. And you see that in the British court system, of course. And it's also a small part over here that you think is part of the face, but it's not. It's actually a stock. And stock was kind of like a leather, kind of like a bracelet, but for the neck, that kept the soldiers their eyes gazed forward, and it was extremely uncomfortable to wear, but the officers thought it instilled discipline in the men, which is, of course, I don't know what you think about that, but that was at least the fashion of the day. British Army also used a wide variety of punishment for those who weren't disciplined enough, including flogging, which means they whipped their own men, both in the Navy as well as in the land army. And that's not very nice. With the red actually painted, we're going to turn our attention to the part over here, which is going to be painted in yellow. And for that, you are going to be using Flash Gitz Yellow from Citadel. And will contrast really nice well with the white. Only these parts over here where you kind of like see these buttons. Goes like this. Like that. Already starting to look fairly okay. Then we're going to turn our attention to the kind of like ammunition bag, and then also the rifle itself. And for the ammunition bag, after I clean my brush, I'm going to show you another color called Rhinox hide from Citadel. I'm going to close this one so no it's painted, it's spilled out. We don't want that. And we're applying this one neat as well. It's a fairly dark color. And only in the ammunition bag. If you hear that you spilled over some paint on the canteen, no worries, and when the paint is dry, you can actually fix it with some white. That's the ammunition bag. Putting it down. Now we're going to put our attention to the musket. It's not a rifle, it's a musket. Rifles were used later on by riflemen, and the rifles could fire. They had a little bit slower. What do you call it? Slower rate of fire. They were much more accurate, but they're also more complex to use. So rifles were used by riflemen who were the marksmen of the day to pick out officers and sergeants. And here I'm only painting the side and the lower part of this musket. I'm not painting the upper part where the barrel will go. I'm painting the underside as well, the entire underside. And the common name for the British musket was called the brown bess, and no one really knows exactly why it's called the brown bess. They had an official name which I had forgotten, unfortunately. No, I think it's called the short land pattern, the long land pattern. The brown bess became the colloquial name for all muskets used by the British Army. And why was it called brown bess? Brown bess, there are many theories. One theory that I choose to adhere to is brown because it's the walnut brown stock, which we're painting here, as well as the bess, as in saying it was usually a name of a woman of not such good standing, such as Sheila in Australian English. And was very common to use a female name for something that you liked. Brown can also be referred to something that's very plain. And the brown bess had a caliber in metric of about 20 millimeters, which means that when it hit, it did a hole the size of a fist in someone's body, which is really, really a lot. And when British infantry lined up like this, like you see the musketmen up here, the effective firing range of a brown bess musket was around 50 to 60 meters, which means that they had to go up, stand there, load the musket, and fire the musket. It was a flintlock rifle, a flintlock musket, which uses a flint and a steel mechanism to fire, to ignite the bullet, and that flies away some 50-60 meters. Now, when we've done this part, I'm not going to talk about this one all day. We're going to paint the bayonet as well as the rifle barrel. No, sorry, the musket barrel. So they stood up, and some of them were kneeling, and they fired, and that's why they stood in tightly packed ranks, because since the accuracy was so low, they had to actually fight in such ranks to make sure they would actually hit something. And the enemy, of course, they weren't stupid. They were doing exactly the same. And I'm using something called Gunmetal Grey from Vallejo to paint all the metal parts of the miniature. Here's also applying it neat. and the top part of this one. Making quite good care not to touch the hands here. But going around, make sure that you don't miss the front of the barrel. So the aim, since the aim was terrible and the recoil was terrible, and I know because I've actually fired one of these, they tended to aim low, and they aimed low towards the belly or the torso to make sure that they would actually hit something, because the kick of the recoil was so high then that it actually kicked the musket up. So then it would actually hit something instead of not something at all, not hitting anything at all. Reloading a musket of this kind took skill. A good marksman could, with proper training, fire 3 rounds a minute. There are even stories of 4 rounds a minute, and even some insane stories of 5 rounds a minute with these muskets. And the reason why I know one of these is there's a phenomenal TV series produced when Richard Sharp, what's called Richard Sharp, the Sharp series, when Sean Bean didn't die in every single movie he actually featured in. This one he actually survives in. And I'm not going to give you any spoilers, but he actually survives because it's a series. I'm also painting the bayonet here, as well as some kind of chain, but this one is actually could also be a wick. And you can paint this one yellow if you want to instead. Okay, coming up to our 2 final things. I'm going to paint the face, and we're going to correct anything with some white on the back here. Before we do that, we will actually, we will do that. So let's go to the white paint we had before, and now we're going to paint the straps over here. Now when the white is actually dried, it's going to be a lot easier to cover it, but it still might require more than 1 layer to receive good coverage. So check out the Richard Sharp series. They're also based on books written by a really good author called Bernard Cornwell, who is probably really famous right now to many of you because he also wrote the books called The Last Kingdom. That is a great Netflix series that you should definitely watch, but it's got nothing to do with the Redcoats. But before he actually produced he wrote the Richard Sharp novels. And there's even he's still continuing doing that. So now you can correct the mistake here, as well as any mistakes you've made before with the white. And don't forget the front. It's okay if you don't reach everywhere. The goal of this one is to actually make sure that they look good on the table. Finally, we're going to take a look at my mistakes here as well, and something over here. And we're going to paint the face. The face is we're going to use a special color from Armor Painter this time, and this is called a speed paint. Armor Painter uses these ones. They have a metal ball inside this one. Make sure that it's made in Denmark. Even I didn't even know that. So give it a good shake. Has a metal ball inside to make sure that it's a lot easier to shake these ones. And it's a contrast color, or contrast is something that is used by Citadel's range, but it's kind of a mix between shades and base paints. This gives a really nice cover and saves a lot of time. And I use it mostly for painting faces, so the hands. And there will be a tutorial for contrast paints up on the channel at a later stage as well, in August. Okay, this is what it looks like. Now, before you go into the next stage, make sure that you clean everything up, that everything looks nice and smooth, and then it's time for the washes. I've already pre-painted one before, so make sure that we can go straight into it. And the wash is we're going to use a very diluted shade of no, not this one, sorry. This one. Black shade by Vallejo. And using this one drop of this one, and about 2 or 3 drops of this one, and about 3-4 brushfuls of water. So the reason why we don't want this one to be neat is that it would be way too dark for our light colored figure down below here. So applying it, you can see here it's a very light wash, and if you think this one is too heavy as well, you can even apply even more water. So you apply this one across the entire front here, as well as the sleeves and the water skin, these ones, and the stock and the wig. You can also apply it to the metal parts. And you can, if you want to go a bit more hardcore, you can apply the metal part straight with neat, and this one goes to the chain as well as the bayonet. Okay, you can use it for the boots if you want to. You can use it here just to show you. Okay, and finally we're going to apply a little bit, no, not a little bit, you're going to apply some Carrobourg Crimson from Citadel's shade range, and across the entire area of all the red parts. We're applying this one neat, taking great care not to touch the other parts where we just shaded the area. We want to make sure that it goes all into these cracks and crevices, covering all the folds, making sure that it looks really nice. Turning it around. And the top. Now, for the yellow part, for the yellow shade parts as well as the brown parts, we're using something called Sepia shade from Vallejo. Also applying it neat. It's a very subtle shade. And there you have it. This one said, the shades are done, and we're going straight into highlights and finishing touches. And here we have a miniature that has been fully shaded, that I had painted before. And what we're going to do right now is we're going to do a light application of the base tones, which is in this case white. And we're going to try to cover only the raised areas if we can. So we leave the shading in between and where the sun wouldn't shine. Same thing on top of the sleeves. It's also a good opportunity to make up for any mistakes we made in the past. Here, for example, I covered the part of the stock with some red. It's a good opportunity to fix that right now. And as well as up here on the top of the tricorn, some red as well that got accidentally covered here, which I didn't see before. I didn't shade the hat before, and I'll tell you why. Because it's already good, looks quite good, and you can easily paint the upper parts here with some white to cover up some areas where you either made mistakes or I felt that a shade was not really needed here. Okay. Same thing for the bread bag. Leaving parts of it underneath unshaded with shade. You can also do the belt and the straps on the front. Now that one done, we're going to pay our attention to the ivory here. Making sure that it actually keeps its tone and not mixed in with the white. And keeping the shaded area underneath here shaded. Now we're going to turn our attention to the red parts. That's going to be the main part of this highlight. Before that, actually, we can finish a highlight of some Flash Gitz yellow on the front, so we don't have to go back and do that. Some reapplication of some Flash Gitz yellow. There you go. And now time for the red. For the red, I'm applying Evil Sunz Scarlet from Citadel, which is a highlight of the red, and I'm going to apply it on selected areas on the back, pretty much across the entire figure, except for where the areas of the shade is really shining, like such as in between here. I want to make sure that it stays there, and really gives this vibrant look that we are looking for in a Redcoat. If you think this one is too bright, you can reapply some original Mephiston red from Citadel instead. Alternatively, you can also apply this one more sparingly, only on the raised areas. Or you can let some of the Mephiston red shine through as well, and dilute this paint by actually thinking that this Redcoat had been out in combat for too long and not really had time to properly look after his garments. Now, something said about the bayonet. This one is a screw-on bayonet. Before that, they had plug bayonets, which is exactly what it says. You plug the bayonet into the barrel, making sure that you can't shoot while you have the bayonet on, which is terrible. The bayonet then later evolved to the screw-on bayonet, or the sword bayonet, where the bayonet was like a 50 centimeter sword on top of the musket, or the rifle, which was a devastating sight. So normally, and this is what we call the bayonet charge, where the enemy would fire, or the redcoats would fire the muskets at close range, and then charge with the bayonets fixed to the muskets. And that means it was a terrifying sight to behold. Most enemy broke upon the charge, because it was even more terrifying than getting shot at, but getting a bayonet rammed into you. And the shock and awe of that was usually what decided the battle. If they would check that advance, it would spell doom on the attackers, because that means they had to try back, run back to the lines and reform and try again, or just outshoot the enemy. Now, the Swedish infantry at this time, the Carolian army, was famous for its ability. Now I'm applying a second layer here. For its ability to go close with the enemy and then fire one volley and then charge with cold steels, which is bayonets, swords and pikes. And usually they took horrendous casualties before they actually reached the enemy. And it was that courage and discipline that made them such ferocious warriors back at the time. Now, this was before the Redcoats actually started seeing some clear action across the battlefields. Now we're talking early 1700, 1710, 1705, and mostly against the Russian, Saxons, Danish and Polish counterparts that the Swedes were fighting. And I'm telling you this because I am from Sweden, so I'm saying that with a slightly bit of pride. That's why I'm also painting this Redcoat, so I really like the time period. So with this one, Redcoat is more or less finished when it comes to the red parts. Now you can see the face up here. It actually looks quite terrifying. We're going to pay a little bit of attention to the whiter part of the straps once the paint has been dried. But now let's turn our attention to the musket. And for the musket, I'm applying some Chainmail silver from Vallejo, neat for the barrel. And Chainmail silver is a brighter color than Gunmetal grey, and it will give it a nice tone of silver up here. Not covering the entire part, just the small line on top, to make sure the Gunmetal grey will shine through underneath. I'm also painting the flint part here with this one, as well as the trigger, as well as these parts here, which kept the wood from not falling apart. Now it's time for the bayonet. Really makes it stand out, as well as the chain here as well. Let's turn our attention to the brown parts. I'm using flat earth from Vallejo for the musket stock to give it a nice highlight. As well as the other side. As well as angling it in here, as well as the top of the bag and the side, the front here. Now this one is almost finished. We have two more details, and the first detail is going to be the white parts that I overlooked before. Now when the red is dry, I'm going to take grey care not to paint over the white, which I've missed here already. The rank insignias, which in this case is going to be a private. And now for a final thing is going to be the buttons over here. You could, if you want to, paint these sleeves yellow as well if you want to, but I'm choosing to keep them white. I've seen them both white as well as in other parts as well, white as well as yellow. I'm painting chainmail silver, and now for some of the buttons, there's a button here on the back, just a small dot. There is a button. There's some kind of like silvery button up here. There are 3 buttons on each sleeve on and there's a little bit of detail on the ammunition pouch. Now I almost forgot, the boots needs to be reapplied with some black, then glossy black, which can easily be done. Where you see the white here has been shining through. Please apply some basic material of your own, and of course don't forget to seal the miniature in varnish before placing it back with your miniatures. So that is what the Redcoat looks like when it's finished, and you can see that this one is almost finished, and you can see that they're over here and trying to fire upon each other. If you like this video and if you like history in general, please subscribe to my channel. Please like and share it with others, and let me know in the comments what you like to see next. And if you like this video, leave a nice comment as well, or just leave any comment if you feel that I've actually overstepped my boundaries when it comes to history as well. Thank you very much for watching, and go and put some paint on those brushes and paint some miniatures. Thanks.